Hi, you're on the Bible Forum. Are you paying any attention to what's going on in the world? What are the Democrats doing? We have a fellow in our church who is a retired pastor, a retired seminary professor. He wrote recently an analysis, a quick summation of what he believes is going on. I thought it would be interesting. He says just about everybody is expecting the House of Representatives will, later this week, pass articles of impeachment against President Trump, and the case against him will be tried in the United States Senate, where he will eventually be acquitted. But wait, I have a different scenario. In this regard, Speaker Pelosi made an interesting admission this week. She said neither she nor the House majority's leadership has whipped this vote, meaning they have not forced it. Whipping is a congressional term for a party's leadership encouraging members to vote a certain way. That can be done by verbal persuasion, collecting a past favor, the offer of campaign assistance, or just plain arm twisting. So, the Speaker says that no overt pressure will be added or applied to any Democrat member or to vote for or against the impeachment resolution, which one can assume included the implicit lack of any retaliation. Now, Pelosi herself is known to have earlier expressed reluctance to proceed. She has stated that impeachment would only proceed if the evidence was overwhelming and the effort was bipartisan, neither of which has occurred. Her comment could also mean that she has no definitive information on how members of her party will be voting. She is known to be a meticulous vote counter and would not normally steam forward unless she was sure of success. But perhaps in this case she has assumed the vote without counting the vote. The case for impeaching started off as a conspiracy between Trump and the Russians. When that was debunked, it morphed into a quid pro quo with Ukraine. When that failed, it changed again to bribery, which is a constitutionally listed cause for impeachment. But when that was proven false, it changed to be again against the exceeding authority of the office. But that case is so weak, it does not contain any specific crime, let alone a high crime, which is one of the constitutional grounds for impeachment. So this is the first time in American history that an article of impeachment has been brought against an elected official without any specific crime being cited. The second article alleges obstruction of Congress. But this was an impeachment inquiry, not an impeachment investigation. There is no such crime of obstructing a congressional inquiry, let alone it being a high crime. And since when in America is a defendant required to assist his prosecutors? The Fifth Amendment renders that accusation silly. Of the 235 Democrat members of the House, 31 were elected from districts that Trump carried in 2016. 8 of those voted to oppose the beginning of the inquiry. The number of Republicans in the House is 199. The number of votes needed for passage is 217. The number received was 230 for abuse of power and 229 for obstructing Congress, meaning 5 Democrats either did not vote or voted opposite their party. It is also obvious that Trump has brought enormous prosperity to America, and American voters historically have never voted against prosperity. Another factor is that all of the Democrat presidential candidates are campaigning on increasing taxes in one form or another, which has never been welcomed by voters and has destroyed more than one candidate's aspirations. By approving these articles of impeachment and sending the case to the Senate, the Democrat Party is handing over the entire impeachment issue to the Republican-controlled Senate. What is even more significant is the fact that the rules will be drastically different in the Senate. The case against the president will be presided over by the Chief Justice of the United States, who would be presiding at a trial, not an inquiry. He would presumably block from admission hearsay testimony, which makes up the bulk of the Democrats' accusations. The atmosphere would be very different, resembling a courtroom rather than a Ringling Brothers circus. The media would be forced to show witnesses, such as the revealed masked whistleblower and the people who originated the false documents used to produce the FISA warrants. The rumor is they're all connected to the Democrat Party. The Senate could conceivably call the sitting president of Ukraine, who would testify that there was no pressure. It would make the Democrat campaign look foolish in an election year. It would also tie up the Democrat senators vying for their party's nomination, as the rules of the Senate require them to attend the entire impeachment trial. On top of all of that, no one questions the fact that the president would be acquitted, and he would use that as a well-deserved campaign issue, making Trump even more popular in an election year. In other words, this would degenerate to a living nightmare for the Democrat Party, which is probably, in my view, the reason why the House has yet to forward any of this information over to the Senate. Now, in light of all of this, it seems to me that the Democrats wish to rescue what little credibility they have left. And if that's so, they should cancel the impeachment vote and substitute a resolution declaring the House body's displeasure with Trump's actions and labeling him in derogatory terms. That would avoid the Senate's involvement, saving some face and dodging some very harsh public relations during an election year. But the question is, are they smart enough to take that route? The vote this week answers the question. Now we wait and we watch as the House leadership has yet to send these charges to the Senate. One wonders if they're fearful or if they're calculating in some way. Pelosi wants to micromanage how the Senate is going to move. The Senate is not likely to allow that. The result here is the president is yet to be impeached. The question is, will he be ever? A resolution of impeachment is not impeachment, only the suggestion he should be. Now, my opinion is, if the Republicans abandon Trump, which they do not appear ready to do, the Democrats would win the next election and change things to fit their worldview. Meaning, a sizable number of Republicans would be disheartened and probably not vote again. There being no viable candidate, no point given the surging power of destruction that would fill the land. Almost any future Republican would be little more than Republican light after Trump, who has been a Democrat most of his adult life. The result here is that no true Republican would win the White House, the Senate, nor the House for at least another generation. So what? So, politically, the U.S. would cease to be a republic based on laws, based on biblical principle. The U.S. would cease to be a republic except in name. The U.S. would be another Europe, and Islam would gain a solid foothold. Israel would come under siege from her enemies, meaning everyone but the Western nations, who would now see appeasement better than principle, meaning conflict. The U.S. would be weakened morally, meaning in her resolve, based on objective moral principle, and be manhandled by China, Russia, Iran, and communists in our own hemisphere. Our weakness would destroy the balance of power in the world, and no Christian, no lover of freedom would be able to survive morally, economically, socially. The overt forces of evil, communism, Islam, would soon dominate the world, and their first target, Israel. After that, any and all freedom-loving nations. Churches, free speech, free economies, free media, all would suffer and or disappear. The twin religions of humanism and Islam would dominate global decisions. Children would continue to be used as pawns in this process. Single-parent homes, rampant immorality all around them, no social moral boundaries, no limit to the visual and musical influences increasingly available. Read personal technologies. Oh, wait a minute. We're already there. Which amplifies the need for wise, steady, moral, hands-on the public social moral wheel. And wonder of wonders, this means Donald Trump. A heretofore godless man who sees our problems and appears to be working to solve them. Now keep in mind the respect he has from a notable percentage of Americans and the wisdom, the ability he has to get things done is all reminiscent of a benign dictator. We need only a sufficient crisis to make him our king, to suspend the Constitution until the threat is contained. What threat? A global threat? A systemic threat, the likes of which we have never seen, the likes of which the Bible talks about in the end times. Food for thought.